Hello everybody, believe it or not, I am roasting hot in Scotland. I'm here filming another video courtesy of my good friends George and Caitlin, who run Region 2, the North Scottish division of the Porsche Club of Great Britain. I've been driving a few different cars this week, but today's is rather special because this is a 991.2 911 GT3. Specifically, this is a manual GT3. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the first 991 generation of 911 GT3 was somewhat controversial for two reasons. It ditched the old Metzger Flat 6, which could trace its roots back quite some way, and replaced it with essentially a hotted up version of the DFI direct fuel injection engine used in the normal Carreras. But perhaps even more controversially, out went the manual gearbox and in went the sole option of PDK, Porsche's double clutch. Now, the fact is, I've driven a 991.1 GT3 and I absolutely loved it. As a driver's car, it's one of the finest things you will ever experience. A scream of an engine that has so much character and texture, and just so many different levels of response and noise, and the PDK box really suits it. But what'll really get Porsche fans in a tears is when I tell them that actually in the 997 I felt like the gearbox was one of the worst parts of the car, because you see, the old Metzger lump really needed revs to do its best work. It came alive at about 4.5 grand and then went all the way to about 8.5. But the gearbox wasn't the quickest thing. You really couldn't rush it. And because the car only had power for the top half of the rev range, that meant that you found yourself more often than not in the wrong gear. There are quite a few tracks that you'd go to and realise that there was never quite the right gear to be in. Either you'd be revving too high and then having to change when you didn't want to, or you'd be out of the power band and just not going anywhere at all. So the 991.1 GT3 I thought was absolutely fabulous, and the PDK really suited it. However, the purists were not happy. So, for the second iteration of 991 GT3, Porsche introduced, for the first time in GT3 history, the option of a manual or PDK transmission. Unlike the regular Carrera, which got a 7-speed manual, this is just a 6-speed, so it's a GT3 exclusive box. The engine is a development of the DFI found in the earlier cars, here displacing 4 litres and revving to a scarcely unbelievable 9,000. As I'm sure you're probably aware, getting your hands on a 911 GT3 is not the easiest thing. It does require some intimacy with your dealer principal, but there are other ways to get your hands on one, particularly if you're willing to buy second hand, and that's what this car's owner Stephen has done. He's wanted a GT3 all of his life, and I've got to say, from where I'm sat now, I think he's done rather well. I've never really been taken with silver cars, but there's something about the GT Silver that really does work, particularly when it's on a very tasty Porsche. And I think the looks of these GT3s are absolutely sensational. They're so purposeful. They're a little bit elegant. The new 992 GT3 has become very busy with its aero. It looks like an RS. But this is already fairly aggressive. Look at those intakes on the back under the wing. Absolutely awesome. And I'm really quite impressed with this so far. It's actually riding quite well. But then I said the same thing about the 991.2 GT3 RS that I drove last time I was up here in Scotland. Those are even more money than these, but you'd still be paying about 150 to 160,000 pounds to get yourself in a good example of a regular GT3. First impressions of this GT3 are really quite good, because I had it in sport mode up until then, and actually it was somewhat compliant. The steering is really good. No, not quite as wriggly as the old 911s are, but actually pretty good. You get a bit of texture through the helm. Porsche's GT department really did perfect electric steering. The 991.1 Carrera was pretty lackluster. The GT3 more or less cracked it. Never going to be quite as good as the old hydraulic, but near enough for me. And I suppose we should talk about that engine, because up until now I haven't really taken it over about 3,000 RPM. It responds really well from low down. Oh, and this gearbox, by the way, absolutely blinding. It's fantastic. Car is not massively torquey. It's 500 horsepower, but only about 340 pound-feet. It's about 460 newton meters. The ease with which this thing can dissect a road, even when you're not trying, is absolutely unbelievable. But I suppose I really should see what it's like when you try. Sweet Mary, Mother of God, that engine. I know people will always wax lyrical about the majesty of the old Metzger engine. I'm sorry, guys, that cannot hold a candle to this. It just does not stop, and I'm going to nail my colours to the mast here. I think this is a more exciting engine than you'll find in a Ferrari 458. It might actually be more exciting than in my Scuderia. Honestly, it's really that good. The car does struggle somewhat for grip at low speeds, although that may be because the tyres are going to be stone cold. But my word, you think you should change up and you realise there's still about 1500 RPM to go. The gearbox, absolutely brilliant. By default, this isn't doing heel and toe for me either, which I'm really happy about. And I've got to be careful here, this is quite a vicious section. Oh, the car did not tap. That I'm impressed with. Holy hell, this thing, it's just on another level. I know people talk about modern cars as if they're some sort of cold, anodyne, just unexciting piece of just metal. But this, absolutely brilliant. And I've just got out of a real fire-breathing, outlaw 3-litre air-cooled 911 that's pretty cool. So if this was anything other than absolutely sensational, you'd know. But it is. That was 6,000 RPM. That's 6 grand, and it goes to 9. Wow. I have driven the 991.2 Carrera GTS. Very, very good car. I mean, a brilliant car. And I know Porsche will always try and have you think that the GTS really is just a sort of cut price, slightly slower GT3. Nah. Not a bit of it. This thing, it just exists on a different planet. It's come from a different time and place to the GTS. It's so good. Everything about it is brilliant. The suspension, I swear, is softer than the GTS. It's definitely more compliant, as far as I remember, than the old 991.1 GT3. The engine doesn't have that sort of two-step power delivery of the old unit, but I think it's actually maybe even more exciting than in the RS, or there's not really that much between it. The RS looks amazing and crazy and angry and all that, but honestly, from where I'm sat, can't really remember myself enjoying that car anymore. And I did have genuine concerns that maybe the gearbox wouldn't be up to the rest of the car. In actual fact, it makes it. The thing with GT3s as well is they're not just welded down to the ground, they do move under you. One thing I would say about this car, I figured that it would brake it a little bit harder with a little bit more authority than it does. I've got no issue with the feel of the brakes, they're okay, but I think maybe the tyres just aren't as warm as they'd like to be. That's the one area this car I think is lacking thus far. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble and you can't get out of it as quickly as you might like. I've driven some cracking cars in my lifetime, I really have. I've been very, very lucky. And this is going instantly into the list of the best ever. Do not pass go, do not collect £200, right on the podium for you, 991.2 GT3 manual. I've always always enjoyed a really good Porsche. I've had a bit of an on-off relationship with the company. I have a good relationship with Porsche GB, but I don't get on so well with many of their dealers. However, none of that, and I mean not one single scrap of that matters when you find yourself behind the wheel of something like this. It is a pure, simple smile machine, a shot of adrenaline right to the eyes. And what I love about it perhaps the most is that the old 997, whenever I got a chance to drive it, and if you've got one and think I've got it badly wrong, please give me a shout, I'd love to have another go. When you weren't really on it, it felt just wrong. It didn't like it at all. Whereas this, I can kick back, relax, drive it at 5 or 6 tenths and still be having a wonderful time. The steering is delectable. It's just got that right weighting, it's that lightness of feel. It's still a Porsche in there, not quite the full fat, you know, air-cooled experience, but there's enough of it. Whereas say the 981 box dress that I drove recently was still somewhat devoid of sensation. This is great. These seats, incidentally, are the only ones you'd want in a GT3, 918 buckets. They are perfect, really very comfortable. Just got to be careful when you get in and out of them that you don't smack yourself on them because, yeah, you can hurt yourself quite a bit. But once you are in them, they hug you nicely. You can do a big journey in them, no trouble whatsoever. I love my 430, don't get me wrong. Fantastic, wonderful, brilliant car. As a driver's tool, I think this is easily its equal. With that manual gearbox, maybe even it's better. But I figured this being a Porsche, that being a Ferrari, that having the Italian flair, that this wouldn't be able to come anywhere near close to matching it in terms of drama. And okay, in terms of the visuals and all that, yes, it's still a 911, still a sort of somewhat more commonplace thing. In here, it doesn't feel quite as dramatic as a Scuderia. But in terms of driving theatrics, that's up there with the Ferrari as well. I wouldn't replace my Ferrari with one of these, but if I had the money, I'd definitely have one alongside it. What a thing. You've just got to be careful because with an engine that can go on for days, the chassis is brilliant, and don't get me wrong, the chassis is fantastic, but it can and will suck at you into doing something quite stupid. I'm surprised the attrition rate of these isn't a lot higher. Flippin' hell. Be ready. It's the slowing down that really gets your attention because the car just moves all over the shop. Wasn't sure what to think of this car. I was sure it would be good. But this good? Wow. Well, a huge, colossal, party-sized thank you to Stephen for allowing me out in his pride and joy. Big thank you to George and Caitlin for organising as ever. And for you, thanks for popping along. Don't forget to like, comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.